Now, don't get me wrong, balancing is a difficult act. It's easy to say if an agent is underpowered, simply buff them, but balancing also has a very unique domino effect. If not balanced properly, you could quite literally spiral your own game into chaos, and every single developer, now and forever, will struggle when it comes to balancing. Yet Valorant has its own unique issue, and it's especially present when it comes to new agent releases. The two that will come to both our minds immediately is 1. ISO and 2. Deadlock. Those are the most recent, and they also sit on almost everyone's D tier for obvious reasons. Better yet, we get the latest buffs to discuss the problem that keeps on going. 1. Deadlock already got the bigger wall and some other buffs. ISO also got the whole faster shield and more narrower shield. So these are post-buff commentary discussions, which again makes it more interesting because these two are still D tier. The buffs did absolutely nothing to move them an inch. So realistically, what is going on? Well, this is where history is the most telling. So let's roll back in time a bit. 1, we know that when Chamber first released, his overpowered nature basically gave Riot PTSD as well as all their players PTSD, because Chamber's power lasted a year and completely dominated the game to a very aggressive regard. It's one thing to be S tier, and it's another thing to have the entire meta at your fingertips and revolve around that one agent. The biggest problem that we have here, if we actually put into retrospect the problem that Chamber had when he was first released, he was powerful, but nothing too crazy. His meta slowly shifted in his favor over a few different factors, but one of the biggest ones being that people just started to learn how to use the agent better. So if we look at it from Riot's perspective, their fear now is that if they release an overpowered agent, they won't be able to tell until it's too late, because the scale is not linear. As people get better with the agent itself gets more powerful, and that's what caused the inherent issue that Chamber had. Okay, that's fine, but let's look at a different example. What about Yoru? When it comes to Yoru, what happened is very, very different. He released like hot garbage. No matter how fun he was always hot garbage. He was so bad that even after a few buffs, nothing happened to him. He couldn't move an inch. It took an entire rework and then several buffs later in order for Yoru to even climb from D tier to like C tier for most people.
Another Yoru, what the man?
I consider him B tier, but I don't consider him unplayable, and I don't think most people would consider him unplayable. So we could say Yoru is fixed, but it took a long time and an entire rework to get there. No, but seriously, we see this happen again and again. Harper's release is also very, very questionable, and it took some tweaking, but Harper himself is still really not up there. That's just a complete fact. But again, similar to Yoru, we can't call him unplayable, especially because the pro scene is showing some promise. However, that's a whole nother discussion. Riot's tricky balance between balancing for the pros and balancing for the average player. Now, in my perspective, agree or disagree, Riot should always balance for the average player and let the pros do their own thing, because the majority of players are the average players, and the pro scene is a lot smaller than anyone actually believes it is. For a minuscule amount of perspective, at one point, Riot said that Valorant had 28 million monthly active players, and the all-time peak for one pro match is 1.3 million. Meaning even if we want to add almost another million views in VOD replays, which never happens, at the best case scenario, only 7% of players watch or care about the pro scene. So with my opinion in mind, most of my commentary is based on the fact that I'd like to see agents balanced for the average player and the game balanced for the average player. Alright, let's move on from here and finally get to the newest releases. Deadlock and ISO. What is going on here? Well, when Deadlock was released, she was very, very bad, and what continues to happen is that these agents get overshadowed by others. Like Reyna is already bad, and her base kit and the idea of Reyna isn't very good for Valorant. Actually, it's not very good for Valorant in almost every single rank, not only pro play, but most ranks unless you're a smurf. Then Riot designed another agent based around the concept of Reyna and released a worse version of Reyna. How could we see her succeed? Deadlock, a sentinel, has some cool and unique concepts. I actually think creatively, both these agents are some of the most creative in the game. Like, we have a whole nother dimension on one side, and we have a little freaking cocoon rope as an ultimate on the other side. Like, they are creatively unique, and I don't want to hate on their abilities on their own. Unique agents are healthy for the game. Yoru is healthy for the game. He's a cool and unique agent, and a lot of agents are. That's what makes Valorant distinct from other games. So let's not discourage creativity, but let's encourage speed, because inherently, that is the biggest issue, no matter if you look at Chamber, Yoru, or today, it is Riot's speed when it comes to balancing. Now, this is a double-sided coin, like most things are. If you go too quick, you don't give yourself enough time to actually see if the changes were viable. However, notoriously, this is too slow, because Deadlock, it didn't take very long for it to be solidified that she was trash. Even Harbor isn't chosen very often, right? Like, a lot of times it is obvious when an agent is weak, even out of statistical knowledge. That's the problem, is Riot might be using win rate percentages or other data points that skew the data a little bit incorrectly, because Yoru at one point had a good win rate even before his rework, but clearly they finally realized he needed a rework, and it just took so long. Another thing is the type of reworks. When you say rework, it sounds very scary, but Yoru's identity was kept very well intact. His ult was still the same, but they changed it up so you could use abilities in it. His footsteps just changed into a clone that had more utility, etc, etc. When I think of a Deadlock rework or an ISO rework, I just think of their current abilities expanded to provide more value to your team and the one playing to make them more viable, because sometimes just changing raw numbers is very tricky. If you just make ISO's shield bigger, like he absorbs more damage, it could be way too overpowered, then you have to bring it back down, and it's a lose-lose. So sometimes it needs to be changed inherently to make it better, and I think that's what needs to happen. Riot needs to move it a little bit quicker and not be afraid, because even if they overshoot or undershoot, changes to the game change up the meta, which changes the way the game feels, which inherently makes the game feel more fresh. I would prefer a slight imbalance as long as I'm confident in knowing the developers are ready to jump on it. You can forgive something being a little bit too overpowered and being upset about it as long as the developers are ready within the next Tuesday, which is their patch day, or the Tuesday after, to just get it going, to just get it fixed, to just stay communicative with the community. In the end, something in the middle will make the most sense. I don't want to see balance changes every Tuesday. You actually want a chance to enjoy and learn a meta. I just like to see more confident changes and picking up the pace quite a bit. Because right now the pace is like snail paced. It is just way too slow. We had episode 8, an entire new episode, and the balance changes weren't that crazy. And it was an entire new episode, man. You can get a little crazy in the beginning of a new episode when the rank reset's happening, start figuring it out, and then just change as you go. Even if it's just once every month, 1 to 2 times max per month will change up the game enough and give Riot enough changes to play around with it. And that is the biggest thing we need. They have PTSD from releasing Chamber because he was too overpowered, but then they're the ones who left it happening for a year. You know what I mean? It's still on them. Both sides of the coin are still on them. I'd also like to see more resources into minor reworks, because sometimes we need to realize that inherently the agent's design might be the problem, and we shouldn't be afraid to see some minor reworks even if they need to get reverted. For example, a lot of people way higher rank than me have already claimed that Deadlock's ult just needs to be able to capture more people. So if 2 or 3 are in the little circle, let them be captured. Raze already has a rocket that can ace people if they're all in one bunched up area. It's not that crazy. Maybe it is, but on paper, it's not that crazy. If we're all wrong and it is that crazy, guess what? Riot, the developers, can just change it, and we went Deadlock from D tier to S tier for a little bit, which is fine. Shake it up. I don't feel many people would be upset. It's really not bad to make the game feel very lively. It is a living thing. It is a live service game, and they need to lean into that live serviceness heavily, not just for skins, but for the actual game, please. For example, Deadlock's wall, right now considered somewhat useless. Imagine if when Deadlock throws down that now expanded wall, which, you know, did make it better. That was, in my opinion, like a visual rework we could see. So let me not just put all the hate on Riot. Like, that was nice. It was nice to just see the thick wall come out. I was very surprised, and I think it was good. Now allow just Deadlock to phase through it with her gear. Not her whole team, but just Deadlock, making her quite a unique sentinel when it comes to space taking, because even if that wall's down, you have to be careful. Can't let down your guard. Same way Sage has the possibility to throw down her wall and still climb over it. It might sound insane, but we see with Grimwall, there's a lot of ways to be unique, yet Sage is still like D tier because Riot just nerf after nerf after nerf to Sage and now hasn't touched her. Again, something that could be solved with a little bit more live balancing. Why do we have people like Sage who get nerfed to the ground and then never touched? It's all about the philosophy when it comes to balancing. Riot is just too slow. Inherently, we can agree to disagree on a lot of things. The speed, how fast, how aggressive. You don't want the game to be unbalanced at any moment. That's fine. We can have our different opinions. I think it's more fun. You think it's more chaotic. That's fine. But I think we can at least all agree that at some bases, it's just a little too slow. Even if it's just a little bit or too much, at some bases, the speed is the issue. We can see it across so many agents. Like, the fuck is going on with Phoenix? Hello? Like, your OG duelist from, like, the beta has just never been meta. Ever. Like, ever. Why? Why? Let him throw two. Just give him a second wall. Just maybe that's all it needs. Play with it. Who cares? 2-wall Phoenix for a little while. That sounds fucking fun. You know what I mean? It's not that deep. That's what I'm trying to say. Have some fun. Have some fun. Make it, just balance it. Just do something. You know what I mean? Like, just waiting is what bores the game further and harms the agent. Valorant's agents are what makes the game unique. I will reiterate that. Valorant's agents are the spice of life for that game. They need to be using it more aggressively. And while it's not that deep, what I'll say, quote unquote, hurts me as a Valorant player is seeing that this balance philosophy just doesn't run in the game's veins, because we saw it in the most recent patch. Their idea of nerfing Skye, I mean, she's been S tier for far too long. She needed some nerfs. Let's all agree on that. But their idea of nerfing Skye is like getting rid of fake flashes. How is that? Like, that's the most lame. Like, you're reducing the skill ceiling of an agent to make them weaker. Like, that's like just randomly getting rid of Sage walls, like Grim walls. If let's pretend Sage was A tier and they just got rid of Grim walls because the 1% of people who are using fake flashes or unique playing styles are ruining the game. Like, no, they're making the game more spicy. That's what, dude, if I get fake flashed or fake cloned, it's funny. It's so funny. It's good. That's like, I got outplayed. That's what makes the game up in the brain instead of just raw gunfight. Like, we're playing Valorant, not CSGO. We want to increase the variety. We want to increase the creativity. Like, that's my opinion. That's my opinion. I just feel that everything I've said seems a little problematic based off of even the most recent patch changes. I just don't think Riot's headed in the right direction. And I know I hate on Riot a lot, and I don't always mean to, because I still think Valorant itself is a much more balanced game than the average game. I think the developers talk to us much more than the average developer does, and I do think their creativity, like ISO and Deadlock, are really great. So I do need to give them some brownie points, and I need to make sure this is not taken as pure hate or only hating and that's all I do, because I understand a lot of my content revolves around some of the negativity. But all it is trying to highlight the negativity, pick on it, dissect it, and make a commentary. That's really my goal, right? Even if I sound super negative, it's just because I get passionate about the game, even if maybe I shouldn't be. Anyway, let me know what you think down below. Bye.